Are you ready to scale and outsource your business?
Okay, let's go.
Welcome to the Outsourcing and Scaling Show. I'm your host, Nathan Hirsch, a show where we talk about everything Amazon, Shopify, e-commerce, and digital marketing. Let's get started. Welcome back to Outsourcing and Scaling. Today I have a special guest, Chris Martinez. Chris, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. How are you, sir?
Doing great. For those of you that don't know, Chris is the CEO of DUDE, where they help digital agencies by giving them the people and process that they can scale profitably. Chris, one of the things I love about you is you're all about outsourcing, you're all about hiring, and we're going to talk all about that. But before we do, let's take a giant step back to what you were doing before you were an entrepreneur, maybe before your real job. Tell us what you were like in childhood. Were you a straight A student? Were you a rebel? Did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
That's a great question, actually. So I had a fairly interesting childhood. I would consider it a bit unconventional for a lot of people, at least in our industry and kind of like the digital marketing space. I had a very, very abusive childhood. So not something that is typically there weren't a whole lot of great memories. And so I didn't really gravitate towards entrepreneurship when I was a kid. Back in my teenage years, we were all about being I was kind of like a little hoodlum. And so we were all about, trying to be, honestly, it was like a contest to see who could be the worst kid. And so looking back on it, what I've learned is that most likely a lot of the kids that I was hanging out with, they also had really, really difficult childhoods. And that's kind of why we all congregated together. And fortunately, I played soccer, and that was my one outlet. I played very competitive level, high level soccer. And so, while my friends were getting into trouble 7 days out of the week, I was really only getting into trouble 3 days out of the week because I was playing soccer for the other 4. And that's what I think saved me from going down a really bad path. And once I got to high school, my hoodlum friends basically just kind of disappeared. And because I was on the sports route, that kind of kept me on the straight and narrow. And the funny thing is that my friends back then, none of them were dumb. They all were very, very intelligent. They just didn't really have a lot of opportunities. And I think I just got lucky, right, with this soccer thing. And so we all got really good grades. And then, I got good grades all through high school. And then my friends who just disappeared, who even knows what happened to most of them. I do know that my best friend from middle school, he ended up getting shot and killed after high school. He got really involved in the gang world, which is what we were, all about when we were young teenagers. And the crazy thing is that academically, he was just as smart and just as capable as me. He just did not have a very good home life and very few opportunities. And that's just kind of what happened. So I didn't really get the entrepreneurial bug until I was in college. So college was a huge deal for me because it opened my eyes and it showed me that life was a lot different than what I had known growing up in Torrance, California, which if you don't know that area, it's just a suburb of LA. And so then that's when I really kind of learned about this idea of entrepreneurship. And there's a whole lot of things that went on between then and now running DUDE, but I don't know if we have enough time for that.
Yeah, I can't relate to that at all. My parents were teachers. I was definitely fortunate enough. Do you feel like that gave you kind of a sense for what the real world was like at an early age? Because while I didn't have that, my parents always taught me finances probably way earlier than other people did. But I feel like from your side, you probably experienced what the real world was like and how brutal it can be if you don't figure out your own way early on.
Yeah, obviously, would I have chosen a different childhood, or would I wish my childhood on anybody else? No, of course not. But the good thing, it's a good and a bad thing, right? Because I was forced to grow up very, very early, and in many ways, I had to fight to survive. Just getting through that time period. So I am very, very tough. It's incredibly difficult to beat me at anything. I'm a fighter, literally I'm a fighter. And so that has definitely helped me to persevere through a lot of difficult times as an entrepreneur. But at the same times, I've had to overcome a lot of the kind of chip on my shoulder things that I have had since I was a child, or not feeling good enough, right? Like all these other outside kind of like feelings or feelings of self-esteem and not feeling like I belong. And, it's just, it's something that gets ingrained to you when you're a kid. And so in many ways going into the business world where it's not, like a crazy like fist fight all the time, you right. do have to get along with people, and people have different experiences, the way they communicate, the way that they respond to the way that you talk to them and the criticism that you give. Like a lot of the things that I learned when I was a kid that helped me survive, I've had to unlearn as an adult in entrepreneurship, and especially in leadership now that I have a bunch of team members and stuff.
Makes a lot of sense. And let's fast forward a little bit. So you get that entrepreneurial itch. What was the first thing you did? Was it DUDE, or did you have some other businesses before that?
Well, I mean, I had like a business in college. So like I went to college. I was fortunate if I went to school in Santa Barbara at UC Santa Barbara. And this is before they had like online note-taking services. So one quarter I decided that I was broke when I was in college. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to take notes for this huge class. There's like 1,000 kids. And so I took notes. It was an undergrad, or it was a lower division class, Sociology 1, and I was a sociology major. So I sat in on that class, took notes, and then sold notes right before the midterms and right before the final. And I think I made like $1,000. And that was like my first time actually making money. And like $1,000 when you're 22 years old and completely flat broke is like freaking amazing.
Right.
So that's like really when I got the first itch. But my first real business was in 2007. So December 2006, my dad got diagnosed with cancer. He died a month later, 3 days before my 27th birthday. And I decided that after that, I wanted to start my first business. And I launched a print soccer magazine at the worst possible time in history. And I made an insane amount of mistakes. And within 18 months, I'd lost every single penny that I had. Wow. Didn't know how I was going to survive. And I made it through. But that was my first business, was actually that soccer magazine. And, I just did so many things wrong. But at the same time, I have to look back on that experience with some level of like appreciation, because I would not be where I am today had I not failed so miserably in that first business.
Yeah, I've always thought, like, whenever you come across something now, I feel like once you're 5 to 10 years into being an entrepreneur, like, oh, I've come across this before. I know what to expect, or I know exactly what not to do. Obviously, new stuff comes up, but a lot of it is repetitive no matter what business you're in. Talk about that mindset. I mean, I can't even imagine just losing everything on a business that you probably put your blood, sweat, and tears into. What made you continue forward and say, I still want to be an entrepreneur, instead of just saying, you know what, that was risky, let's go get a 9-to-5 job and make sure that I have that retirement plan,
This is a great question. And it's kind of like one that's near and dear to my heart, because I feel like there's so much marketing out there trying to get people to be entrepreneurs. And it seems like it's the cool thing to do, right? And in my opinion, the reality is that it's not for everybody. This life is not for everybody. Just like, the life of being a doctor or a nurse or, a garbage man or whatever it is. Like, not everybody has to fit into this entrepreneurship box. And if it's not for you, that's totally okay.
Right.
Have the self-awareness to recognize that this is not the lifestyle that you're looking for. But for me, I'm 100% an entrepreneur. That's who I am. I would rather die than not be an entrepreneur. Like, I cannot go a day without being an entrepreneur. It's just a part of who I am. It's my brain is just wired that way. So for me, it was not even almost, it's like, well, I guess it's kind of like not even a choice. It's just who I am. And so that's why, I was always looking for opportunities, seeing things in a different way. And so my first business after the failed soccer magazine, I started a digital agency, and I didn't know, let's jump back 2 years prior to launching the agency. I started learning about marketing, and I taught myself how to build my first website by watching online videos. So I built my first WordPress website, knowing literally nothing about web design and development. So I built that first website in a weekend. And then it just kind of over time, it just snowballed, and I started learning more and getting more involved. And I started working in sales for a company that sold pay-per-click management. Right. And then I saw that they didn't build websites, and I was like, I could totally start this website agency. And that's basically how it started. Fast forward to 2017, and I had my operations down here in Tijuana, Mexico, of all places. And then I launched DUDE with 5 people, 5 designers, developers, and then now we have over 30 people in just a year. We grew to over 30 full-time designers and developers here in TJ, and we're working with digital agencies. So, yeah, I mean, dude, like I feel like this is like like a real entrepreneurial journey where it just keeps evolving and changing, and like you're pivoting all the time, and now we're here, and things are going pretty well.
It's crazy. It's one of those things. One day you wake up like 5 years later, and in my case, I was selling baby products, and then I went to running a freelancer marketplace. And for you, you're in Mexico working with designers, and who would have thought that 15 years ago? Let's talk about hiring. This is the Outsourcing and Scaling Show. Do you remember who your first hire was and how that went?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my first hires in the digital agency, I actually partnered with a guy who had a team in the Philippines. And so we started out with 4 people there, and I kind of inherited that team. And when we started out, my partner was supposed to handle the operations. I was supposed to handle sales. As many partnerships go, it doesn't go according to plan. I ended up helping out with the operations as well as the sales. Then that partner left. And then eventually I was like, hey, working in the Philippines wasn't conducive for our customer service goals that we had for our clients here in the States. I needed daytime support. Right. So then I came down here to Mexico. I was living in San Diego. I was like, I bet you I can find designers and developers in Tijuana, Mexico, which if you don't know the geography, it's literally like 10 minutes from downtown San Diego. So my first hire here was a graphic designer. They didn't really know web design, but he was really, really good at Photoshop, all that good stuff. So that was our very first hire, was a designer down here. And then eventually we found a developer. And the challenge was like, we didn't even know where to look, because back then they didn't have Indeed in Mexico, or they didn't, people didn't use Craigslist really to find applicants. Right. So it was really difficult to just find out, how do we find people? And eventually we got our first developer. He's actually still with us now. He's one of our team leaders. But yeah, I mean, we made a ton of mistakes hiring people. So I don't know if you want me to talk about that.
Yeah, tell me about your worst hire. You don't have to give a name, and just give us
for sure
what happened and what.
First of all, I take 100% credit for every bad hire that we've made. That was my decision. I did not evaluate them correctly. I did not put them in a position to succeed. So our worst hire is I ended up hiring this developer. I think he might have been our second or third developer ever. And my gut told me that he was not a good person. And in the developer world, it's interesting because you find people who are technically very, very good, but they lack soft skills and they don't really care about the clients. And that's when you kind of have these like ego battles with developers. So anyways, I didn't listen to my gut. We brought this guy in because we were kind of desperate, and he was basically a cancer. And there was another kid who we hired after him who was really young, fresh out of college. And the older guy, the original guy that we hired, he was super, super talented. And so the younger guy latched on the older guy, and basically the two of them became this cancerous plague inside my office. And so the straw that broke the camel's back is I was working out of the office. Actually, I was working from home this one morning, and I had a job post up on Craigslist. And the older guy who was who was cancerous emailed me inquiring about this job post on Craigslist, not knowing that he was already working for the frickin' company. And so immediately I sent an email to the person who was handling our HR, and I said, hey, we got to let this guy go. And in Mexico, it's very, very difficult to let people go. So we had to do all this paperwork and basically come up with a plan to dismiss this candidate. And so I brought him in on a Friday. I said, hey, how long have you been looking for another job? He says, I'm not looking for another job. And I turn around my computer and I say, interesting, because I got this email from you on this date during work hours. And I was like, so how long have you been looking for another job? He's like, I've been looking for since the day that I started, I've been looking for another job. Just like smug jerk. So I'm like, okay, well, today's your last day. Sign this form. You can go pick up your last check. And then like 15 minutes later, his little buddy comes in and says, could you do that to me? And I was like, well, yeah, like, of course we can. Like, if you are looking for another job or you're not performing, then yeah, like, this isn't like, this isn't a charity, you know? And so then he quits. And so that one day I actually got rid of both of those people who were super, super toxic to our company. So yeah, that was a very, very memorable day.
What was it like that Monday after the weekend coming back without having them in the office?
Literally, it didn't even take that long. That afternoon, breath of fresh air. And like because they created so much anxiety amongst the other staff who did care and did want to be there. And so like that afternoon, we all went out for drinks and we were just kind of like chatting about it. And I like told them what happened and they were like joking about like, oh my God, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, how do you apply to a job that you're already working for? So it was just like, everybody was like super mellow and it was really fun. Like after that. So, I mean, that wasn't the last challenge, but yeah, that was definitely the most memorable one. I still tell that story to this day too.
It's a great story. I mean, how many people lose their job because they applied for their own job? It's good.
Exactly.
Let's talk about managing teams. You've obviously gotten better at it. And when you manage 5 people, it's different than 10, then 15, then 30, where you're at now. What tips do you have for the audience on keeping that culture and keeping people productive?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, like you hit the nail on the head when you said that, you know, your needs change as your company grows and the way that you do things changes as well. But I think that everybody needs to embrace the fact that you are here, you are hiring great people and you need to be able to empower them to just do their thing and allow them to be great. Like micromanaging, it just does not work. And I've been on that side of the spectrum. And unfortunately, like when I started my company, I didn't really know that I wanted a whole lot of staff. And I kind of looked at them as a necessary evil. And that's the complete opposite. You know, like now my mindset is completely different. And these people that we employ are the most important aspect of our company. And I say in many ways, they're more important than your product because your product can change or the market might dictate that your product needs to change. But with great people, they'll be able to help you overcome any of those obstacles. So the first thing that we look at when we post a job, when we're looking to fill a position, is obviously there's a core set of skills they need to have. So let's just take developers, for example. All of our developers need to be absolute experts at HTML and CSS. And then we have some varying levels of PHP and JavaScript. So when we put the job post up, we say that they have to have those skills. The person will typically reply with a resume. We'll analyze the resume, and if we feel like it's potentially a good fit, then we'll move them to the next phase. We send them a questionnaire, like an email questionnaire, like asking them certain questions. And it's related to work and also like personal goals, what interested you about our company, so on and so forth. If they answer those correctly and in a timely manner, and how they reply is as important as what they reply with.
Right.
So if they fit with our company culture and when their answers are good and we feel like they're a potential good fit, then we move them to the next phase. We'll do a phone interview, and that phone interview says a lot because we're also, you know, obviously we're looking at their what they say on the phone interview, but we're also looking at how they say it and how they treat people. Because I'll take somebody who's a great human all day over somebody who might be a fantastic, might have fantastic technical ability, but is just kind of like a jerk. And so, you know, like you can always train for skill. You typically cannot train somebody to just be a nice person, you know, to be a good human being. So if they pass the phone interview, then we give them an online test. And this is again to test their technical ability. And this is like a standardized test that we give everybody. So it's easy to measure across a bunch of different candidates who's got the chops and who doesn't. Then if they pass that, then we'll bring them in for an in-person interview. We have at least 4 people interview them. And everybody's going to get a different take. And then the other thing is that as you go through this interview process, by the first person that they interview with, the candidate is going to be on their absolute best behavior. Right. The second person, they're getting a little tired. By the fourth person, you really get a sense of who this candidate is and how they're going to perform under pressure. Because they're tired and they might be a little bit cranky or whatever, but you want to see that, you want to get down past the first couple layers of this shell that they're wearing while they're in the interview. And so then after all of us interview them and we all collectively agree that this is somebody that we want on our team and that this is somebody we could picture ourselves working for one day, then we'll give them one final test, which is like, if it's a developer, it'll be like a website build or something like that. And we give them that test with the deadline. If they pass that, then and the quality is good, then we bring them on. So it's a very, very thorough process that we put everybody through. But I mean, it's just so important because we have a very, very distinct company culture here that we've developed. It's really like the staff and everybody has developed together, and we want to maintain that. And we don't want to let anybody in who could be cancerous, because we've seen the negative side effects of that. So that's our hiring process in a nutshell.
I love it. Talk to our audience about hiring developers, because it's a totally different animal. It took me years to figure out how to do it. They yep. tend to not have the business mindset. You tend to not have the developer mindset. At least I don't. Yep. What have you done to overcome that? Any advice for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it goes back to the soft skills, so like looking for developers who have an innate desire to serve other people. Like there has to be an element of customer service inside of them. If they just want to program and do the work and they don't really care about the outcome, then it's not the right person for you. Let them go be somebody else's problem. Because like in what we do, and like we work with digital agencies, so there's a marketing component and like, we're trying to get conversion and leads and that sort of thing. So there is a very cut and dry, like this is a successful campaign, this is not. And you need to find the developer who, even though they might not be seeing the end product, but they understand that they are a big part of this program and that they care about that and they care about what's happening to the clients. And not everybody is wired like that. Some people just want to sit behind a desk, and they want to program and they don't care what happens on the other side. But when you're hiring developers, in my opinion, you want to find somebody who has that internal desire to serve others and that really does care. And there's ways that you can test for that. I mean, you can look at their customer service training. We actually also give what we call a psychometric test to candidates, so we can look at, the way that they think, their values, their beliefs, that sort of thing. And that sort of stuff does change over time. So not to say that a younger person is going to be set in their ways forever or an older person is set in their ways forever. But as you experience more, your values and your beliefs, your belief systems start to change over time with experience. And so the psychometric exam really helps us to look at that person internally and what drives them, what their values are. It helps us to gauge how they're going to treat our customers as well as their teammates. So that's another thing that we do that really helps out. But yeah, I would say first and foremost, look at the soft skills.
Love it. Chris, I really enjoyed hearing your story. I think you gave some great advice to the audience. Where can people find out more about you, and what are you excited about in 2019?
The first one I'll say, you can go to our website, dudeagency.io. And then if you go on the social medias, on the Facebooks, we're at dudeagency.io, at facebook.com/dudeagency, actually. Instagram, it's at dudeagency.io. So that's the first way you can connect with me. You can also just shoot me an email. I'm very open with that, chris@dudeagency.io. And then the thing that I'm most excited about for 2019 is just, our growth. So, in 2018, we went from 5 to 29 people. And then this year we're over 30. We just moved, I don't know if you can see my camera, but we just moved to this huge office. We basically took a warehouse and converted it into office space so we can have 200 people here now. And I'm just excited about the growth and continuing to give opportunities to people here in Tijuana. Let's be honest, there aren't a lot of positive things that are being said about Tijuana, Mexico. And so it's really, really fun for me to show, at least in just the digital agencies, that, hey, there's an unbelievable amount of talented designers and developers here, and they are wanting to help you grow your agency. And so task by task, we're changing that narrative about Tijuana, Mexico. And that's like another just big thing that gets me fired up every single day, is being able to kind of change the way that people are perceiving this country and especially this city.
I love it, man. Thanks for coming on, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Did you enjoy this content? If so, click like, leave us a comment, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you great content all about hiring.